Very big welcome to everybody to our webinar today on interviewing for your first legal role. We have the incredible team from Tyler Wren with us today to share their absolute insights and gold around how to make the most of your interview, how to prepare, how to deliver an interview that is absolutely on point. We have partnered with Tyler Wren to deliver a series of these webinars based on the information that we've obtained from students about what they want to hear about. This is the second in the series. We'll share some links afterwards if you didn't manage to capture the first in the series, which was about what's happening with legal roles, what's happening out there in the market. But there'll be others coming as well. So we'll talk about that at the end. But I'm going to hand over now to Lisa and Ben, the incredible Tyler Wren team, and they can take it away. Oh, actually, just one piece of housekeeping from me. If there are questions as we go through, can you please capture those in the Q&A function, which is down your bottom of your screen, not the chat. I'm going to monitor the Q&A rather than the chat. It just keeps everything in one place, and it's easier for us to ensure we capture and respond to everything that you've got to ask. Thank you. Over to you, Lisa and Ben.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenna. So yes, as Jenna mentioned, we are currently doing a series with the College of Law, and we did do a webinar about a couple of weeks ago now, which was about preparing CVs, cover sheets, and basically securing interviews. So we are now taking this to the next step, which is how to prepare for interviews and how to perform within the interview. So we're going to break that down into multiple steps, but the first one is the foundation of that, which is the purpose and alignment. So with that, we want to start with identifying your why. So why this specific path? So within law, as you'll be all aware, there's plenty of different avenues to go down, different types of law, different types of firms that you could be applying for. So the first step is to identify where you'd like to be and obviously approach those firms. But in terms of the types of roles, so do you want to be in a fast-paced litigation firm, for example, more of a mission-driven work within government? Or do you see yourself as a business partner in-house somewhere in the future? So really identifying that before the interview is quite important. So with that, for example, if you want to go down commercial law, it's really identifying why you want to go down commercial law so that during the interview, you can discuss this. So if you have a previous employment background, for example, working within business, this would be a good thing to talk about within the interview. In terms of the actual interview itself, giving examples of why you've chosen this type of business or this type of role to apply for. An example of that, though, it's not the be-all and end-all. So if you do pick an area that you're interviewing in that you decide later on is not something you want to stick with, for example, if you've gone into family law but have realized that's not for you, you can change this later on. We do regularly talk to 1 or 2 year PQE lawyers who have decided they're not enjoying the type of law that they're currently in. Best to sort of make that realization probably earlier in the career, as it does become harder the further you progress. But within that 1 to 2 years, it's not a major issue.
I think the other thing just to mention on that front is yeah, you're at the very start of your career. So you might not get it right. I don't think I left uni and when I'm going to work in as a legal recruiter, and 30 years later, here we are. So it's important to kind of put an emphasis on it, but also what is it you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy working with people? Were there certain papers that you enjoyed at uni? Were there certain papers during, your profs that you really enjoyed? So as well as thinking, if you've already made your mind up in terms of sector, great, good for you. But at the same time, if you're not sure, think about what it is you enjoy and what you've kind of found in the past.
Thanks for that, Lisa. Yeah, and same for myself. I was in construction before I realised that I prefer talking to people than walls. So, in terms of the next thing to think about is where you want to be in 5 years' time. So whilst that can obviously change quite dramatically within 5 years, just having an understanding of what the long-term, what the 5-year goal is at this point, it is a tough question to ask before you've sort of entered the workforce. But nevertheless, if you do find yourself in the wrong place or somewhere that you're not enjoying, you will have still picked up good skills in that time. So it's not the end of the world if you end up in the wrong part of law. And a good exercise to do before an interview is write down the things that you must have in a job. So, for example, that could be mentorship, it could be work-life balance, it could be any of those things, and look at the job that you're applying for, that you're interviewing at, and understand if this position realistically offers you the things that you are looking for. So that's a key, some of the key things to do before you go into an interview.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Ben. So for those of you that weren't on the last webinar, my name's Lisa Gray. I've been working in the legal team at Tyler Wren for many years now, and we love doing this kind of stuff with the College of Law. And apologies, I think my lighting's terrible. I am not blue, but for some reason I am on this. So, I'm sure at least it will be memorable, which is one thing that we'll go with. So I'm going to now work through the next step, which is structured preparation and the deep dive. So I guess one of the best ways to ensure that you deliver a great interview is to do your prep. As lawyers and as those within the legal sector, a lot of you enjoy that kind of research, analysis, overthinking a little bit. And this will really help you prepare for that deep dive side. So what some key things for you to do are for example, for law firms, get on their websites, get on the partners' LinkedIn profiles, see who else, maybe even on LinkedIn, you can find who works for the organizations. Look at the core practice areas, any key areas where they've had particular wins or where they've had a high profile matter that's been in the media. Or indeed, if they've been part of the Law Awards. As an example, I was talking to an in-house team today who have just, they were a finalist at the Law Awards yesterday. So having that kind of knowledge and being able to demonstrate that that, will make you memorable. In addition to that, as I mentioned then, just for in-house, as well as looking at the in-house team itself, look at the company, look at the latest financial reports, maybe even the industry as a whole, as to what's affecting them potentially from a legal perspective. As an example, a few years ago, all of the banks are obviously impacted hugely by new risk and compliance regulation and law. That's something that if someone can display that they've actually found out a bit about that, will make you stand out and will make you look and hopefully be very interested in the job opportunity and in the team itself. In addition to that, it might be worth thinking about how the legal team actually supports a business, for that in-house piece too. Yes, you are there as in a legal capacity, but also how can you impact on that positively? Same again for government and NGOs. Read their annual reports, look at public policy that goes along with the potential team that you're thinking of. Change to regulation, obviously ComCom and FMA have had huge changes over the last 12 months in particular. So, can you demonstrate that you're aware of that? And obviously building this knowledge about your potential employer is going to help you learn if it is the type of gig that you want, but also make you give you more confidence and give you different things to talk about potentially during an interview rather than just you. And volunteering that information actually allows you to demonstrate some different communication skills rather than I. So the other key thing that it would be great for you to prepare is stuff about yourself. So when you are looking at a job description, if you're looking at other people's profiles that work within a similar role to you, um, where can you demonstrate potential experience either in your personal pursuits or your professional life that can resonate with your potential employers? And there's a method to do this which is called STAR, and it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. STAR I think has been around for about 30, 40 years, but it still gives you a really good way of explaining your experience. So, S, describing the situation, T, what was the task at hand, A, what your actions are, R, what the result is, and then reflection. So, what did you learn from that whole kind of piece? There's loads of podcasts and loads of stuff on the internet to give more guidance with things like STAR. You can go down a rabbit hole with it. So just make sure that you're understanding how it relates to you and your interview, and how it can kind of really add quality to it rather than, just preparing lots and lots of information for the sake of it. So that's kind of covered off the structure, preparation, and deep dive. Ben, do you want to go through next?
Yeah, so the next step is presentation. So obviously the saying is first impressions count. This is no different. It is your first opportunity to impress. So we'll go through some of the expectations of somebody interviewing. But one other thing to understand is that interviewing, even if you have interviewed multiple times before, I mean, it always is a nervous occasion. It is something that's quite critical in your early career. So it's important to remember that it is a two-way process. Whilst they are trying to understand you and trying to learn about you, it is an opportunity for you to evaluate them as well, and understand whether you want to work there. If you are a graduate with great grades, they want you just as much as you want them. So just remembering that to try and, I guess, calm the nerves before you go into an interview. It is totally okay to have, sweaty palms and be a little bit nervous. That is actually normal, and quite natural. Yes.
Just to add there, and also the fact that you have been invited to an interview shows you that they are interested in you. They're interested in your skills. They're interested in your experience. These people do not have time to waste. So they've identified something valuable in your skills and experience as to why, they want to learn more about you.
So that should hopefully set some nerves at ease going into the interview. Now, as we said, first impressions count. So the obvious place to start is dress code. So making sure that you're dressed well. For firms and government, conservatively with a tailored suit, navy and charcoal is still the gold standard. So that's important that you invest in yourself and make sure you're looking sharp in that sense. For in-house and tech roles, maybe more modern professional, so a sharp blazer with tailored trousers. But you want to be you'd better off being overdressed than underdressed. So really that is quite important. The next part would be the greeting. So the very first interaction with your interview. So everybody goes for the handshake, but it's important to have a firm handshake rather than I guess a not firm one. Everyone remembers a not firm handshake for the wrong reasons. So make sure it sounds silly, but even practice this before you go into an interview. Make sure that you've got that, because that is really the first impression. In terms of other things, eye contact, and if it's online, because a lot of interviews now are over the internet and not in person, there are a couple of basics. Eye contact at the beginning, and make sure one of the things that can be quite confusing doing things online is knowing where your camera is. You're trying to create eye contact. So right now, I've got spreadsheets and all the things open at the moment that I'm reading from, but if I want to talk to you directly, I look at the camera. So in an interview, remember that. Also behind you, try not to have anything too distracting to take away from yourself. So no fancy artwork that could be controversial or something like that on the wall. So plain background, or like I've got, just something straightforward. So that's the greeting. Also saying, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and to meet you. It sounds quite basic, but when you're nervous, sometimes you forget the basics. So saying, hi, thank you for having me is quite important. In terms of body language, if you're like me, I fidget with everything. So to be on this webinar today, I've removed everything from my desk. There is nothing here for me to fidget with. You don't want to be spinning pens. Even if you are nervous, this is a real sign that you're really nervous. So make sure you've got nothing like that around you. If you're at home, obviously a bit different if you're in purpose. Make sure your phone is on silent. If you're at home, again, make sure pets are away. So don't have a cat come running across the screen or a dog barking. And make sure flatmates or anybody that you live with are aware that you're about to have a very important interview. You don't want flatmate turning up with KFC in the middle of your interview. It's just not the best look. So a couple of basics, but again, if you've not interviewed much, these can make the difference. If you're in person, perhaps jewelry, for example, like bracelets and that, again, they can become distractions if you're nervous. So perhaps not wearing them because they can sort of jangle and make quite loud noises. So so that's dress code is important. The greeting, firm handshake, and then if you're in person, make sure you've got eye contact and that handshake. Sorry, and if you're online, having no distractions around you.
Great, thanks, Ben.
Sorry, Lisa, before we move on, there has been a question on Ben's presentation then. Is there a different or a more diverse dress code for women? So the examples you provided were suits, but is there something else that, for women to consider?
Yeah. Oh, do you want me to answer that, Ben, seeing as fit the
You
brief
might as
a little
well
bit
do.
more?
Yeah.
Joke. So, yeah, absolutely. So, I think things can be a little bit more diverse for females just because we have bigger wardrobes, right? And guys just tend to be stuck to that kind of trousers and jacket flavor. But smart dresses are absolutely appropriate. I wouldn't go too wild on the colors. I'd probably stay quite earthy and quite neutral. Again, that kind of trouser, kind of pantsuit combo works really, really well for the more corporate gigs. Can be more relaxed for more kind of mid-tier in-house and for kind of that kind of government feel and general practice as well. The other thing that will give you a really big hint on this, though, is if you go on to the organization's website or onto employees who are on LinkedIn, you should be able to get a feel. You should be able to get a flavor as to what those individuals are wearing and what that kind of tone is. So that should always help you on that side. So we're going to now walk through the fit and asking sensible questions. So as we mentioned earlier, the interview process is a two-way street. The fact that you're there is great. The fact that they're showing interest in you is awesome. They want to learn all about you and your experience and your personality, but it's really important that you do the same. This could look like the most fantastic job on paper, but you might want more information. Of course, you should want more information in terms of what the entire package looks like. And also, if you go all the way back to those key questions at the start, what are the most important things to you? You need to ensure that you're really covering that off during a question session. The other thing is that if you're not asking questions, it doesn't really demonstrate a lot of curiosity. So this is two things: an opportunity for you to show, quick thinking, show some insight that you've been listening by asking them good questions about the stuff that they've been talking to you about, and also ticking off the vital stuff that's important to you. So we've got a few examples here. And again, really depending on what's important to you, we would assume mentorship would be. So you might want to ask about training. You might want to ask about feedback loops. You might want to ask about what the support looks like. You might want to consider how they kind of gauge good performance. So I think when you're looking at mentorship, everyone's probably going to ask, what's the training going to be? Maybe kind of just dig a little bit under the surface and ask something a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more comprehensive than just the basics. Again, we've got a few other examples there. So daily life. So what does a challenging week look like? What will be my kind of KPIs, but possibly key performance indicators? So again, it's about what's important to you. Again, if you're looking at more of an in-house or a government role, how does the legal team interact with other departments within the organization? How does it contribute towards the organization's goals? So again, we're not just necessarily asking about the job. It's all that stuff that kind of is really important and wraps around it. Another great thing to talk about is culture. So if you're someone who really thrives and values in a particular group, assess what types of individuals they are, and just try and work out what that culture is going to look like and how you can ask good questions that's going to really help you shape and understand what that culture's like. As an example, this is a pretty cool one. What's the one thing that surprises people when they first join a team? We actually, Ben and I and the wider team, spend a lot of time talking to potential employers about all this stuff. And it's actually most of the stuff when we're talking to job seekers that gets them really interested in a role. So as an example, one of my favorite clients, one of their benefits was actually the partners cooked each staff member on their birthday a birthday cake. And randomly, because that's shown inclusion and kindness, that always used to go down an absolute storm. Another law firm that I work closely with, during interview, they always ask their employees what their favorite cheese is for cheese Fridays. So again, you should be looking at things, as I said, that are important to you. And if it's something that's a little bit more quirky or something from a training perspective that's going to be important to you, make sure you've got some really solid questions that's going to really satisfy your curiosity about that, but also maybe show an employer's personality as well. It doesn't have to be stock standard stuff. And I think the other key thing it does is that it does make you stand out.
Thanks, Lisa. So the next part is closing the growth mindset, how we follow up. So this is quite interesting because this is something that we talk about with all of our candidates at every level when going to an interview. So the first thing that you should do at the end of an interview is reiterate your enthusiasm for the job. So ask about potential next steps or when you could expect to hear from them. But the reason why doing this is important is often, like I said, with the candidates that we've got at different levels, when we catch up with our clients, the first thing they say to us is, we're not quite sure if they're interested in us. You want to be leaving that interview, if it is somewhere you want to work and it's gone well and you're happy with everything that you've experienced in that interview, you want there to be no question in their mind that you want that job, so that they walk away now questioning whether you're right for the job rather than whether you want it. So just a simple, I'm really grateful for your time today. I've really enjoyed meeting with you. This is something I would definitely be interested in if we progressed. that sort of enthusiasm can set you above other people who are perhaps a bit more nervous and sort of they finish the interview a bit more shy. So with the thank you, so post the interview, once you've left, follow up with an email within 24 hours. This does not need to be a novel. We're talking probably 3 sentences max, just thanking them again for their time and that you're looking forward to hearing from them. So again, just reiterating that you're interested. Also, if they've interviewed, which they do, to be fair, the larger firms, quite a number of people in one time, you're again brought to the front of mind. So that's the second step that we would recommend. If you don't get the job, obviously this does happen, still stay positive. It's still worth sending a follow-up. This, again, doesn't have to be a massively long email, but just something along the lines of thank you for the update. Whilst I'm disappointed, I truly enjoyed meeting with the team. If you have any feedback on how I can strengthen my application for the future roles, I would appreciate that. Again, the reason why this is important is we often meet people who are 2 to 3 year PQE that end up working for partners they previously met. So that network is important. Even if they have rejected you this time, it might not even be you. It could be there's just more qualified or people that are standing out slightly better than you. But in 2 years' time, that partner could be the person you're sat in front of again. And if he's giving you feedback because you've asked for it on how you can interview better, and you've taken that on board and now have a bit of experience, you've kept that door wide open. So if you don't get the job, what you do then is just as important as what you do when you get the job. Treat rejection as free training. So naturally, it's disappointing when you don't get a job. You've invested time, you've gone through the process, but every no gets you closer to a yes. So long as you take on board the feedback and look to obviously, I guess, take that feedback on and improve on any future interviews. So that's sort of what we would do following the interview.
Great, thanks, Ben. So hopefully you secured the job that you wanted to, and you've got an offer on the table. And we know our first step into the world of work sometimes is a tough one, right? And it might be a few meetings that you have to go to. It might be many applications that you have to make. We're in a time now when things are extremely competitive. But if you're not in the game, then you're not going to get any further, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you need to make sure that you are part of that, which should eventually work into a job offer. And absolutely, it's still really key that you are evaluating that. And don't let, just the fact that you've got an offer, blind you on that. Let's just make sure that we are really evaluating it and making sure that it is the right thing to do. As I've said, at the moment, it is more of a jobs-driven market. So, there are more candidates at this level than there are jobs, but at the same time, you don't want to be going to work to an organization or to a team that you're really not happy with or that you're not interested in, because that is not going to help in terms of your mental health on a day-to-day basis, but also if you decide to move on from the role quickly, it doesn't show stickability, and you want to make sure all those things are right. In addition to that, we always advise you guys to look through the terms. So check notice period. If it's a law firm, are there billable hours expectations? Is there flexibility, and do you need flexibility? Now, what we do tell many individuals at this stage of their career, being in a work environment where you can learn by osmosis, where you can ask questions on the fly, where you just get to see stuff happening daily and you get to see how people interact, what their communication styles are, what management, what management styles there are, and just generally how stuff is done. You're not going to learn from that on a remote basis. Don't get me wrong, when you're going down the track, that remote piece, hybrid flexibility will, should be open to you. But I would be advising maybe asking about that a bit further down the line. So once you've got a little bit more experience under the belt, rather than trying to do that initially. It happens very, very occasionally, the hybrid flexibility piece. But yes, it does just obviously limit things. Also, think about what salary you're being offered versus hours that you're working, so you understand exactly what commitment you're making from a financial versus hours perspective. And also know when your reviews are. So, do you have a 3-month review during that critical time period? Is there a 6-month review? Is it just annual? Is there any detail on what those reviews look like, what the expectations are? Again, this just enables you to walk into this with a very realistic understanding as to what's going to happen. And then finally, wrapping back to what your must-haves are when we started this presentation. So if this doesn't meet, 2 out of those 3 or the majority of those 3, absolutely, don't be afraid to say no, but just be aware that that jobs market is a little bit tight. So just be really clear on the decision that you're making. And if it is a partial fit that allows you to build up some level of experience, then absolutely, that's kind of, but just making sure that you're evaluating it, and making sure that you're kind of assessing what you're going to get out of it, as well as, your fit for it, is really, really important. So that kind of brings us to the end of the presentation. But, what we'd always add is prep like a lawyer, present like a peer, and then reflect. The interview doesn't start when you walk into the employer's office. It starts all the way back from when you are starting your cover letter and when you're preparing a CV, and then doing your deep dive, and then understanding what's important to you. So this whole piece is part of the interview process, and each part, I guess, should be just as important as the actual meeting itself. So we do hope that you found that a little bit useful. We've got some questions now, Jenna, I think.
That's right. So if anyone's got any other questions, please pop them through in the Q&A. Please type them in there and then we can answer those. There's actually only one in there at the moment. Is it common for interviewers to ask specific law questions? For example, present you with a scenario and ask you how you'd approach the issue?
It really depends. So it isn't common, but it's not but also it does happen. So rather than what we tend to advise on this is, rather than start preparing loads of different scenarios and wrapping yourself up in ribbons on this, if you're securing an interview, the best way to tackle this kind of thing is to actually ask the employer, what is the interview process going to be? So please, and let me know if there's any testing, because sometimes there is a bit of psychometric testing. And please will tell me what are the kind of questions that you might be asking me, including technical legal questions and anything else that I need to prepare for. I think there is a common misunderstanding that interviewers are there to trip people up. They're not. They're there to see the best in their candidates and in their applicants. Otherwise, why would they waste their time doing that? So, but you can also really help and support the process by getting all that information up front, and email them or give them a quick call just to understand what the interview process might look like.
Touch on that. We even dealing with senior lawyers is still a question as a recruiter that we ask any employers, that we have people interviewing at, is what are they to expect from the interview. So we still even ask that later in the career, when they've already interviewed previously, because everyone interviews differently.
Thank you. I'm looking now at some of the questions that came in through our registrations. So not live questions. One of the ones that came through was, is it okay to take notes during an interview, or is it distracting to the interviewer?
Yeah, I'll touch on that. So, yes, it is okay to take notes during an interview, but it is a balance. So by that, we talked earlier in this presentation about eye contact and having that at the first intro, but it's also important to be doing that throughout the interview. So whilst it is okay to take notes, you don't want to have your head down in a book throughout the entire interview. That does not come across well. So if you're taking notes, make sure they are only brief notes, and that you're still remaining eye contact with the person who's interviewing you.
Thanks, Ben. I think most of the other questions that I can see that have come through are questions that were covered in the first webinar we did, which was really about preparing you're looking at your CVs and preparing yourself for an application. So what we'll do after this webinar in the next couple of days is send through today's webinar and the presentation slides, but also send through a link to the recording of the previous webinar and those resources, because then that will help to answer some of the questions that have come through there. Doesn't look like there's anything else coming in. We'll give people a minute if they wanted to ask any further questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
One that, Jenna, one that we've had before, which I think is always, it's a real weird one. Well, it's not a weird one. It's an awkward answer in terms of what you have to do to solve it. So brace yourselves. We tend to get this question up, which is the best way to practice for interviews, particularly when practicing alone. And for those of us out there that aren't, natural extroverts or want to, be in the theatres and, in the kind of Christmas concerts, it is a performance in a way, So what we tend to advise any of our candidates going to interview, it's genuinely use a mirror. So look at yourself in a mirror and practice your facial expressions when you introduce yourself, and actually maybe record some of your answers on your phone to sample questions that might come up. As we've said, study the job description and prepare answers where they might be looking for good examples. But also there's quite a few podcasts on basic interview skills online, which you can go into, which also, as I mentioned before, the STAR technique of answering questions, that can give you some examples and show you how people's body language is and how that works. And yes, it is weird looking at yourself in a mirror and talking to yourself. But at the same time, it just gives you an idea as to how your face works and how you kind of carry your body language.
Thank you. There has been a couple of questions come through. So the first is there anything, I'm going to merge these together. Is there any common questions we can expect for law firms? Also, is there any particular skills, either hard skills or soft skills, that law firms are looking for in the interview process?
Absolutely. So lots of employers, not just law firms, but employers in general. And I know that, we're talking about the legal industry here, not just law firms. Will ask what your favorite papers were, where you feel you excelled from a study perspective. Many will, and ask why you felt those papers were great. Now, sometimes the answer that I receive when I ask that question is because my lecturer was great. That's great. Look, we all love our lecturers, and there are those out there that are way more engaging than some of the others, but it's not a particularly insightful answer to an employer as to why you enjoyed those particular areas of law. So you probably need to come up with something a little bit more insightful than that. They will always, well, they don't always, but they are likely to ask you why you want this particular role and what you know about the organization or about the firm. They're also likely to ask you about any particular challenges that you've had, whether that's personal or professional. They will want to know if you do have any professional work experience of any particular type and where you feel you have built that and why. And they're going to ask you why you want this particular role, definitely. So maybe strengths and weaknesses a little bit, but they're kind of the key things that we see coming up all the time.
Thanks, Lisa. That's really helpful. Particular hard skills and soft skills that they're looking for. Anything
Yeah.
you can comment on there?
So hard skills, research, resilience, reliability, and demonstrating that. So, none of this has to be kind of legal based, actually. So, those areas, communication, so written and verbal communication is really important. Um, Hard skills, commitment. So again, one of the biggest complaints our market, the legal industry has is the tenure of junior lawyers in their firms, in their businesses, in their teams. So a real sensitive point is where have you shown resilience and where have you shown kind of stickability. I used that word earlier, but where you've used that stickability, if these guys are going to invest their time and their team's time in your development, they will expect what we call a return on investment. So that is seeing you becoming a valuable member of that team. So you need to demonstrate a fair bit of that too.
I will come back. There's a couple of questions, but I'll do them in the other order because Jess's question is specific to what you just talked about. So, when you ask the question about professional work experience, what's the best, and you don't have any, what is the best way to go about answering that question?
Yeah. So I think what you need to do, or what we advise individuals to do, is to draw upon your personal experiences. So whether you're a member of a club of any description, how you have organized yourself in terms of your studies, how you have, it could be supporting family. There's a whole host of other stuff except for professional. Also, your interests in terms of, if you're into a particular style of writing or if you're into and why. So communication is what these guys are looking for. Yes, if you've got those other skills, great. But at this point of career, employers are really looking for raw potential and ability and being able to answer those questions whilst thinking on your feet and coming up with explanations that are compelling without having, the easiest of evidence to work with, that they'll be interested in that and want to see how you articulate that.
What are some common red flags or green flags that students too often do in interviews?
Yeah, I think talking about other firms would be something I would stay away from. It's unlikely to be asked, but it could be asked from a partner or somebody you're interviewing with. Have you applied for other roles? And what are your other job search look like? I'd keep that very vague. I wouldn't go into detail as to where you're interviewing, who you're meeting with. That would be one thing I would stay away from. The other thing is a red flag would obviously be stay professional. You will have somebody in front of you who is a human, and you will make connections on things like sport or interest outside of work. In fact, is often what they're looking for. They're trying to understand your personality, but it's just understanding. Don't become too casual. You are still in an interview. The person is still expecting you to stay professional. It should go without saying, but obviously not swearing, things like that. I think they're probably some of the red flags. With the green flags, though, I guess, or things you should do, if there is an opening to talk about personal stuff outside of work, if you're being led into those conversations, obviously do talk about that stuff. Don't be too uptight and think it's just about work. I guess, Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say a green flag. If there's more than one interviewer in the room, make eye contact with more than just one person. So it's really easy just to hone in on one individual. and it can make the other person feel like they're a bit of a spare part. So make sure that you are engaging with those individuals, with all individuals in a room. The other thing I think is a great green flag is just temperature checking with your interviewer. Have I covered that question? Or at the end of a particular part of a meeting, or if you can feel like a natural break, I guess, partway through the meeting, which you tend to have, you should be able to identify that those meetings, those interviews are cut into separate segments. Just temperature check. Yeah, are you comfortable with my response there, or do you need any further information from me? Because then again, you're just making sure that you're covering all your bases.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. There are a couple of questions here that refer to people that have already had a previous career, so career transitions. Is there something that firms are looking for there? Is there any advice that you'd give to them about how to ensure that significant previous work experience is highlighted?
Yeah, if you have a previous career, obviously a partner or somebody who is interviewing you is likely to want to see what that looks like and how it can be, what skills can be transferable essentially into the role that you're going into. Obviously, if you haven't been a lawyer, then it won't be legal things. But if you've been in the business world before, and you're interviewing for a commercial lawyer role, then they'll want to understand still what you've done in the previous positions. I don't know if there's any more specifics on that, Lisa, you want to add?
Yeah, I'd probably add, again, go back to your prep. So if you've got a job description and you've done your research thoroughly about the firm or the team or whatever you want to call it, or the organization, actually you should be able to relate some of that experience into this role and kind of reconcile them through. So you may have worked in an industry where the firm has clients within that industry. So you may have worked, and you may have an understanding of how that industry works, which would be really, really valuable to that to that law firm, as an example, or to that in-house team. If I were, we actually do talk to a lot of those second career lawyers. I love them because of them bringing that experience. The majority of the time, the communication skills, organization skills, procedures, processes, all of that. But I do often advise maybe even try and target organizations and law firms that has a link to that particular industry that you've been in, or to a team that has a link to that industry, because you are bringing something really important to that.
Where I'm based in Christchurch, there's obviously a lot of agriculture, farming, and that sort of work. So naturally, law firms then do get involved with this type of work. So if you're coming from that background and you're interviewing at a firm that you've done your research and can see they have an area of expertise in that, then sort of that is a positive. So talking about that experience, I have another example of somebody who I have on a second interview tomorrow who has come back from Dubai, has never practiced in New Zealand, but has practiced overseas. So we've got her a second interview, which is awesome. And today we were going through some interview preparation, and she asked, "Well, what are they going to ask me?" And I said, they're looking for transferable skills, and just using I sent her away. I mean, obviously we talked about this, but I sent her away and said, with AI these days, there's one quick way to find out what is transferable. She's never practiced in New Zealand. I don't know a great deal about Dubai law, and using that tool, she can understand maybe some of the strengths and what could be transferable, so that when she goes into the interview, she's already got a starting point. So obviously with AI, you have to be careful because it does hallucinate, as we all know, but you can use it in that situation as well.
That's great advice. Thank you. The final question we've got coming through in the chat is about referencing your knowledge of the legal industry. So to what extent should candidates be showing in the interview what they know about the legal industry, and how should they be showing that?
I think that this actually varies depending on who your audience is. But as a rule of thumb, um, firstly, I think that it's probably more important to know about your employer and the team. I think that that focuses in. At the same time, if you can demonstrate that you're aware of who the main leaders are in that particular sector, that might be something to do. Um, but also reading various, publications and making sure that you're just up to speed on it. So I would be spending, again, if you want a time frame on it, no more than 10 minutes talking about that stuff during an interview. No more, absolutely none. And look, there is so much going on in the industry at the moment, but tailor it down, pinpoint it to what might be important to that particular team, to that organization, to that law firm. Because again, that's going to demonstrate that research piece. But yeah, no more than 10 minutes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great advice. There are no further questions coming through, so we might wrap up. I want to thank Ben and Lisa for their time today. Immense knowledge of this area, and it's incredibly useful to the team, to the students that we have, to be hearing from you directly. So thank you. I want to also thank those that have attended today. I appreciate your time and the dedication you're putting towards learning and figuring out how you can move into your next legal job in the most positive way. This will be circulated the recording from today will be circulated via email, along with links to the previous webinar that I mentioned and any resources. So that will come through in the next few days. But that is us wrapping up for today, unless there's any final words from Lisa and Ben.
I'll just thanks to you guys for allowing us to be part of your network, and hopefully we've delivered some decent information. But if anybody does want to ask us anything direct, Jenna, you know that you're more than welcome to share our details with.
That's right. So you can email any specific questions through to me, and I'll pass them on to the team at Tyler Wren to get back to you if that's something you would like to do.
Cool.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have
you,
a
everybody.
wonderful evening.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.